Good afternoon, everybody. Give me one little second still. Just trying to get some things arranged. I tried cleaning up the desktop just a tad. It was a disaster. So anything I got left on here, just please excuse that. Welcome to anybody coming to the stream. Also, we had a couple there waiting, I guess. During that, I had to restart the intro there a couple times. Apologize for that. But I think we're just about up and ready to go. Double check a couple things quick. Okay, what I do have up so far, what I have intended to showcase or present, conduct even, for this stream involves the editing, I guess, of a model, primarily for use in the NASCAR Racing 2003 season simulation. This same concept can be applied to practically any type of 3D model, be it the fact that as we sit here, this is the 2014 version of 3D Max by Discrete, just for references. What I have in the viewport, as you can see here, is a grandstand, if that wasn't clearly discernible. This is the edited version, I guess, of an original model that was previously created by another developer, and I have that in the scene as well, so I'll show that just to show the changes that have been made. So this is the original object that had these wings, I guess you could call them, on here. You can somewhat see the transparent model that has been edited underneath that. Kind of gives you somewhat of an idea of what has been edited to this particular model. What is involved to preliminarily, yeah, there's a word for it. In order to get all that's attached to the original model, say for example, and that's, I'm going to go ahead and hide the edited pieces, because that's eventually what you'll end up with, are different pieces. Primarily the way this particular 3D model, it has at least this many different textures, separate textures. It's not one combined texture, I guess you could say. So it's fair to mention we'll eventually get to that part. These pieces here, this is what's been reverse engineered, if you will, from the original model. So what I'm going to do for now is at least hide those selections and get to our original piece prior to editing out. So what you want to do is, with the original model in here, and like I said, this is 2014 version of Max. Any newer version of Max that has been tried with this procedure will work, to include even older versions like Max 7, 8, and maybe even Max 9. So that's just another fair mention. So what you want to do is you want to select the model. It's kind of hard to tell, I'm probably understanding in the viewport here as far as to see that this model is selected, and the way you can double check that is to just bring up the items list, see that you've got the item selected, right click on it, and in the menu here in convert to, you want to convert to an editable poly. What this will allow you to do is a lot more than just the editable mesh, and one of those things is being able to determine what textures are applied to this actual model and which locations. So with that being converted to an editable poly, you want to bring up your materials editor either by just the press of the M key, or to go up into the menu, rendering, and your material editor, your compact. either way. What this will do, and realizing I guess this already has, okay, that's not what I was expecting. Okay, so be it the fact that I had already opened this, you won't necessarily get this populated necessarily as far as all these textures that are applied. Yeah, you'll just have this will relatively in most cases be blank as far as what's actually applied to the original model. So what you want to do is select this little eyedropper tool, click on that, and then what that'll essentially do, and see it changed it, it'll populate all these as far as what textures are actually applied to this model. See, it did rename all these items here, and you'll have to go back into, so now it'll tell you specifically it uses G seats and so on. Now what you can do from there is in the rollout here, and your menu, I guess, on, you know, as far as what you might have set up on your version of Max as far as your workspace might be a little bit different, but with this editable poly you'll be able to go under, well, first I'd have to select polygon, make sure you select your polygon in the modifier list here, and scroll up here and you'll get to this section to where polygon material IDs, and there's a couple of different things. There's a rollout here, you can pull this down, and these are all the textures that are applied to this, and you can go like this and it'll show you, it'll highlight the different sections that are applied to this as far as, so that has a texture, that has a texture, this is its own texture, there's another texture as far as the sides, and so on. Now, one of the things, the other thing is probably a fair mention, is this original model, the way it was built, includes what is called LODs, or levels of detail. With that, you're going to have different textures applied to it, so it accommodates, I guess, the modification of the model at different distances. What I haven't necessarily taken the liberty with the edited version of this particular model is remove that. Be it the fact that most up-to-date or modern video cards can handle quite a bit of detail, I guess, in models, and it has built-in, and in the games themselves they have built-in safeguards, I guess, to limit how much is being shown and so forth. So won't go too much into that, but that's something to consider, I guess, as far as that. Be it the fact that this particular model is primarily being designed for a much older sim, be it NASCAR Racing 2003 season. It's still with the advent, I guess, of new modern GPUs or video cards and stuff like that, they can handle more detail. So it is not necessary as much anymore, or whatever, especially with a model like this, to have to apply levels of detail necessarily. So getting back to the different materials in here, just kind of giving you an idea as far as what you can do here. This will list much the same way as you go into here, because this is all the different sections of this model that have textures to them. Before you do anything with this, and this is highly recommended, before you mess anything with the textures and get them applied to the texture, what is best to do is to select the polygons here, and you want to go, once you have say a particular one, and I'll refer back to the rollout here. So like for this particular part of the model, I'll select the first material IDs, which is all these polygons have a particular texture. What you want to do from there, with those polys selected, move it up and go up to your edit geometry rollout. And keeping in mind this is still under editable poly with your polygon modifier list selected. Once those are selected, click on detach, and you can name this whatever you like. In this case, I'll just name it, since I know the texture that's applied to it, I'll name it as G Seats. Don't need any of the other two options there, just leave those be. So now what that'll do is segregate. So I must already have this. Oh, I see what it did, because I still have that in the scene. Yeah, because I've got those other ones hidden, it renamed it. What you'll have now is a separate, so I'll show you exactly what I mean here. So if I remove the rest of, let's select off of that, and just select this object and hide it, you'll see now that this piece has been segregated. So this particular part, the portion of the overall model, has a particular texture to it. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So now I'm going to bring back the original object. Okay, and then what I'll do is go back into here and go to polygon, and I'll go back into that rollout for the material IDs and select the next. Oops, I guess I'm still on. Yeah, so go back into object, original object, go to that rollout. Oops, select polygon. Go to the material ID rollout, go to the second one, and see in that you'll notice in here too, as you segregate that out, these will depopulate. So now it's going to the second portion of the model that has texture to it. So you'll be able to select that. You see those highlighted. Again, roll up to your edit geometry, detach, and I'm going to go ahead and name that as G Seats logo, as I know that's the texture that's applied to it. And this is, you know, to name them, whatever, just helps you kind of understand what goes to what. And you can feel free to leave it named, you know, just default, that's fine. Oh, I know why that didn't rename. So yeah, this is, you know, just for the sake of this stream, because I have all those other pieces that are hidden, I'm naming these a little bit differently than what I have there. I'll bring those back in there. I'm just trying to demonstrate as far as the process of being able to segregate all those different parts. Granted, this particular model has these different types of pieces as I'm presenting them, but you may not necessarily have to even deal with this, depending on the model that you're dealing with. So next one I'm going to do, go back to the original object, make sure that I got that selected, go to the material ID rollout. So now it's on the third one, and there's just a little sliver right here, but I'm going to detach that, and I'll name that as, I believe that was Skybox. Skybox. And I'm primarily, what I do, I guess, as far as segregating it out, is just apply the texture that's applied to that particular part of the model. It's easier to determine. So this one should have renamed, yes, because it renamed it 001 to me, because I already have a piece in here that's named Skybox that's hidden, but it's 3D Max is recognizing that's why it's automatically renamed it for me, so it doesn't step on that original piece, which is a nice little feature, actually. Okay, going back to the original model, go back to rollout, material ID rollout, and choose the next one. Now this is the sides. You can see those highlighted here, between here and there. We'll detach those, and we'll name that G sides as per the name of the texture applied to those. Okay, so that segregates that. Should still be in the model, just want to make sure. Doesn't hurt to check. Then go into Material ID Rollout. We've got 2 pieces left. Now, this is where it gets into the LODs. We've already got this piece. This particular material IDs between this, the 5 and 6 that are left, have to do with either a light map, which we're going to apply our own, and I might go into that actually. There's a light map that's applied to this, and it uses the game's own environmental materials, I guess you could say, to apply shading to it. Whether or not I'll go into how to apply shading to this particular model would yet to be seen. We'll see how this goes. Primarily, what I wanted to put the information I wanted to put out in this stream is just to show how to basically reverse engineer an existing model and be able to edit it. So we'll stick with that plan. So for what I'm going to do for now is just leave those 2 out of this. We have all the pieces that we need, that we're concerned with, I guess, to be able to edit the model. Okay, that was just to show the process for that. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just remove all these ones I just created, because I already have those created. So just not to be too confusing. Alright, so I'm going to delete this, and the logos. Wait a minute. Make sure I did the right one. Okay, so delete. Oh, I'm still in Polygon, that's why. Yeah, that's probably another thing that's can be somewhat of a peeve or whatever with Macs. You have to make sure you don't have anything selected in here. If you got anything that's selected as yellow, you got to make sure that's deselected, so that when you select your whatever your piece here, it'll let you manipulate it. So that's deleted. Okay, we'll do this GC logos, delete that. Sides, these are all the ones I just did, so skybox, I'm just trying to get it back down to the original model. Okay, so that should be the original model. Yeah, and actually I don't really need that. That was just, like I said, just to show, so I can hide this one as well. This original object. Why is it still selected there? Okay. Alright, so we'll just take that out. So now we got that out. Now let's bring back in. So hide by name, and here's all the pieces that I already did previously. These are already done. So let's bring in the seats. Already has the texture applied. And to get the texture applied to it, it's simple. It's pretty simple. You actually go into here and go back to all these here that are selected, that you have. After you do your eyedropper, click on the model, whatever, and it populates as far as what's it. You'll then be able to go into these different these different parts here. Let me go back into this and just make sure we got the right stuff here. Yeah, see, this is looking for the TGA, which I don't have. I got a bitmap of that. So I'm gonna, you can just navigate to where you have those textures at. In this case, I have them. Where am I at? Chicagoland, 2018, Grand Street. And yeah, this particular texture here, I'm gonna point it to that. Okay, and make sure that's applied. Should be, yep. So as long as it shows it, the texture there, that's good. So now I know I have the right texture to it. And this, with this particular model, it has certain areas that need texture with an alpha channel, which would mean transparency, and like the sides, for example, and others that don't. The seats don't need it. So I'll go back to here as far as our listing here. I'll go into the G Seats logo. And so make sure. Oh yeah, click on a diffuse. Yeah, see, that's going to the TGA as well. So I'm going to navigate to where that texture is at. Yeah, keeping in mind, I don't necessarily have these. Normally I would be working on this on the desktop, so that it's easily accessible. I don't have to flip through a bunch of garbage but for the sake of this, should be okay. So we'll just do that and make sure it's applied to. Whoop, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so we're going to go back up to, what are you doing? Okay, just want to go back up to the parent. Go to this one here, which is the skybox. That one does have, needs an alpha channel, which it does already have, so that's cool. Yep, G skybox TGA image alpha, so I know that's good. Go back up into here. Our size, that's another one. And go under diffuse, image alpha, G size TGA, that's good. So we're all good there. And please let me know at any time, and anybody watching that's joining in on the stream, if anything is confusing, you have a question about, please feel free to put that in the chat. I will try to re-explain that as best as possible. Yeah, keeping in mind, okay, I'm realizing the two textures that are left are actually the full deals here, which is fine. If you have any residual items here, it won't matter. As far as when you save it as a 3DS, go into your version of Max, I guess, upon export. As long as you don't apply anything physically to any remaining materials that are applied to the original model, it'll just, yeah, it won't apply those. And you may not necessarily go through that. It'll show that process as far as being able to produce the pass file. So, okay. Everything there should be good. Let's bring the rest of second here. Alright, instead of double checking these, I ain't dropping any frames, that's good. Am I coming through okay? Feel free to let me know. I can't help you if you can't hear me, that's for sure. So yeah, let's bring in the rest of this. Excellent, thanks, Torch. Okay, so we're bringing that. So this one has its own texture. That's a G-Seats logo. This is our G sides. And like I said, keeping in mind that this has already been edited. So, and then this was that little sliver that's up in here. I know what I did wrong. I pretty much already showed as far as what had been edited, so yeah, I don't necessarily need to go back to that. So this is what we have now. We fully reverse engineered the original model to have all these individual objects with their respective textures applied to it. And I can go into the actual folder. This is the entire, oh cool. Yeah, so what it is, okay, here's the textures. This is this texture. This is the full one, and we'll get to that as far as like, this is the script that has been constructed for this particular model to get it back to its original function, as far as to be able to switch out from full to empty stands during different race sessions, in this case. I won't necessarily go into that, but kind of leave this up here for a second or two, I guess, just to give you an idea of what's involved with that. Primarily what's going on here, just to kind of summarize it, it involves two sections, because like I had mentioned, there's two different seating sections. This one has a logo texture, and then this is, you know, got this pattern here with the blue and light blue or whatever. And those different sections switch out to show full people, if you will, to show during race session that they're populated. That's primarily what's going on with this one here. It's defining the MIP in this case that shows for empty, which probably a fair mention, I guess, when you're applying your textures initially to a model that does switch out textures, you want to put, and you can define that however you wish. You can go the other way too. If you put the full and you want it to switch to empty, but primarily it's best practice to use the empty and have it switch to full, say for example, or even if you've got an aspect or whatever as far as half full, you can define those appropriately in your script. As far as this section here, it's only got the 2, but you can add another state to whatever where it's half full, and you can define that in the weakened state switch. Right here, like I said, it's just showing an empty and a full. And bear in mind, as far as the naming conventions for your stuff, it's just to make it easier for yourself to understand what is going on with your script. As far as when you're constructing your script, make it easy to understand. If anything, for yourself to understand. Okay, this is my empty MIP, this is my full, and this what. And there's a flow to it then, because you're defining everything as far as your pass file, the textures that are going to switch, how the textures switch. In this case, this is a modified texture base function. It switches from empty to full, and then your weekend switch as far as when those textures show. In this case, 0 means testing practice, happy hour, and during race, which is the 2, that's full. And then that's just the one section, that's the main seating section, and this other section, which is the logo section, is defined much the same way, and that'll switch out by itself. And then they're combined down in here. These, bear in mind too, this particular object, and this is something that gets missed a lot of times as far as when constructing a script. Sometimes more focus is usually always put on just the weekend switches. They want to get those into place. But yes, I do, Torch. As far as a simple script, I don't think, from what I can remember, don't quote me on it, from the script that we have there, it's a simple one. It doesn't involve something as complex as a grandstand as far as switching out textures. It's more or less just to switch from a race session as far as what shows and so on. Not necessarily a grandstand, but it does give you a really good template to understand as far as like what the different functions are. Like I said, anything in capital, like in like in this case, it's the state switch variable weekend. That is a function, and whatever variable you decide to apply to it. In this case, I've used weekend switch 1 for that particular portion of the model, just to differentiate as far as what's going on with it. You can name these containers, as they could so be called, container variables for the function, anything you want. But anything in capital, as far as the actual functions, as far as a copy, as far as a mesh group, and so on, those have to be capital. The conventions for that request that. So that's something to keep in mind. So as you're constructing your script, I'm not trying to make this a stream, I guess, all about scripting, but there are much required and even prerequisite, if you will, as far as naming your functions. Because even like the output, as far as for the final 3.0, that has to be capitalized. You're defining your container to which you want it to pull it from. You can practically pull from any one of these variables if you want, but like I said earlier, it's like there's a flow to this thing. Everything that is done above, say, this point is going to be included. So, as far as this population switch here is going to contain everything that's going on above it, as far as the switching of the textures, what shows and when, and what weekend state, so on and so forth. So when you get to this point, you've fully condensed everything that's happening, to include even like these parts that are static. They don't change, as far as the sides and the skybox, that little sliver piece. That's all combined in here. it's already been done up at this point. Actually, I've already combined those parts here, so moving downwards, getting to that final tip, that's already been included. So that's something to keep in mind as you're constructing your script. It's like, okay, define what you need to define as far as, like, you always start off with your pass. Whatever textures, whatever they're going to switch, you want to do that next. Going in your weekend switch, finally in your population switch, and then finally to your output, which is your 3DO. And then you can have it spit out whatever name 3DO you want. In this case, I have kept this particular model, I guess, the same name as the original, because just to keep it simple. There would be no need. You can easily swap out, I guess, as far as what's already there. The transform coordinates, as far as the location of it, I did not modify. That's probably another fair mention. This entire model, in its entirety, is all set to 0. So, like, when you go to put it into a track using the Limit 2 or the Sandbox utility, you'll be able to, move it and put it in its own transform as far as where. Yeah, that could be arranged, Torch. In fact, just like the sample script or whatever, as far as just mainly what that sample one that we put out there demonstrates, as far as presents, is just to have a weekend switch in it, as well as a population switch, to get that at least going, because those are key, actually, I guess, into exporting out your final 3DO. Because without having that, if you were just to run your pass export through the Make 3DO utility, through a command prompt, you won't have any of that. It'll be just a static item. You won't be able to, by the press of the O key in the game, for example, you won't be able to have those hidden and so on. As well as the weekend switches, as far as switching out, as far as what's being presented, I guess, in different weekend states, none of that will show without scripting it. So that's primarily the reason for the scripting. You're probably right. I don't disagree with that. I think there is some confusion on it, and like we've discussed offline, even as far as with the advent of using the 3D SimEd utility, that is not the best approach. And this is another reason why I guess I found it necessary, I guess, to show the proper way to edit a model, as opposed to using the 3D SimEd utility. Granted, that's a very robust tool, and it does have the capability to allow for creation of 3DOs, editing and even writing the application itself. But if anything, this is also to bring awareness, I guess, to the fact that is not the most optimal way to create a new 3DO. This way that I'm demonstrating in this stream is the way you want to do it in order to keep the model optimized. And I'll get into, I guess, as far as, compiling this final 3DO and whatever, and make the comparisons even to the original model and the new one. With the removal of all these polys with these wings from the original model, as I showed earlier, there's an extreme difference in the size of the model in comparison to, say, running it through 3D SimEd. Big time. And it does make a difference in the performance of the track, primarily in the way of frame rates, lag, and clipping, and what have you. So, just a side note as far as like that. So if anything, if this is to bring awareness, I guess, as far as the proper way to edit a model for the NR 2003 racing simulation in particular. So kind of lost my train of thought. Okay, so I got all these pieces, and we've fully reverse engineered all these pieces, and I know what I was talking about. When you initially start your model, especially if it has it's going to involve the switching of a texture. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was going through all the different textures. So in this case, we have an empty seats, and this is a repeating texture, obviously. It repeats, I believe, horizontally. I don't think I'll necessarily go into that. What's nice, what's really cool about using an original model that already has the mapping in it, all the mapping is retained, as you can see. This is all based on the original model that's been edited. As far as going through that process that I've already shown previously, as far as how to understand where all those textures go and segregating all the different pieces, you can then go through all these different materials and apply them, and it'll automatically put that. All those mapping coordinates are maintained. So there's nothing more to. Now, if you wanted to, if you really wanted to, if you're really kind of anal about it, I guess, if you wanted to adjust some of the misskewings of some of these textures and make, like say this area, I guess, straighter so it's not coming to a point, something like that. We have other videos, I guess, that show how to correct those types of things. I'm not going to go into that because that's already been demonstrated. But if you found it necessary to want to go through all this, you could do that. For the simple, just keeping this as simple as possible, just to edit the model and remove the wings on it, that's about all I'll go into. Now, getting back to the textures, as far as what you want to do, if you've got a grandstand in particular, or anything, even if it involves, like, say, a video screen, you want to start your texture as far as at ground zero, as far as like with either nothing, be it empty or empty screen or whatever the case may be, and then to have it switch to something that's active. That's the the general logics, I guess, logistics or whatever behind what you should consider, I guess, as far as putting a model together, be it either existing or a scratch build. Works the same way. So yeah, getting back into the textures, this one has this texture that switches from this to this. That's for the one section in the logo section, which is empty, and then there's the full. And then it goes into the sides, which needs, and this is important too, if I haven't stressed that enough, if there's any area of the original model, or even when, especially if you're creating a scratch build, anything that has any part of the model that has transparency in it, as far as texture goes, it needs to have an alpha channel. And the best way, and I'll go into that in a little bit, to produce in this case, a TGA with an alpha channel that will allow, and you'll be able to tell that once you apply your texture, it'll give you the option. I'll go back into this one here, for example. It will give you the option for an image alpha. If you don't have this option, if you're not able to select this, then your texture is not compliant, as far as with an alpha channel. So, and like I said, I'll go into that just a little bit here as far as how to produce a proper texture with an alpha channel. So, as some of you may know, as far as the WinMip2 utility, that's kind of the go-to texture, and I'll just go through this really quick. Let me go ahead, I'll just didn't give me my proper option. I'll bring up my WinMip2 utility, which I forgot to do. I'm going to go into, bear with me a second, go to Chicagoland files. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and open this G-Sides. I know that has transparency in it. Now, this is the original MIP. It has all the original settings to it. To make a proper texture TGA with an alpha channel, if this wasn't already made clear, you can open the original MIP file using WinMip2 utility, and by selecting TGA, because the original MIP file already has the transparency selected as far as this little swath here, once you select TGA and don't change anything else, once you go to the pull down and select TGA, you'll already have this. It's already selected. You don't need to do anything else. All you need to do is simply save it as TGA, and you're done. And you'll be able to tell, like I said, whether or not it applied correctly when you go to try to apply it to the model itself. Going through your material editor, If you do not have this option, if it's still grayed out, then one thing you can do is try a reload to see if it populates. But if it doesn't, then that means you do not have a proper TGA with an alpha channel. But that is critical upon, especially upon producing your pass file, and that's through you have to use an older version of Max up to 2008. Anything beyond 2000, Max 8 or 2008, pass file won't work. The pass file exporter doesn't work. But anyway, as far as the pass exporter is concerned, you have to have that texture applied as a TGA with an alpha channel, not a bitmap, or it will not apply that alpha channel to it. You'll either get the black where the transparency should be, or something else. But in any case, it's not gonna be favorable. So it's a fair mention. So that's just a little tidbit of information as far as how to properly create a texture with an alpha channel. You can take, and even if you make one from scratch, what you can do, and I'll demonstrate that, I guess, real quick. Let's say that this is a bitmap. You had made a bitmap in your painting program of choice. This is probably a bad example. Let me try something else. I'll open a different file. Let's do this. And I'm just using this as an example, so don't take this as for. So let me open this texture here, and say this texture had a transparency on it. So you got your bitmap open. You don't have your swath. It's not selected. So you're going to go, and here's a little bit more tidbit of information. If you didn't know how to select a transparent color in your texture, and I wish I could have the camera on this, I guess I'll just try to explain this as best as possible. But in your bitmap, if you want to say make this color your transparent color, let's say this is the magenta or the pink, you depress, in this case, the left shift, you hold that down, put your mouse pointer on it and click it. What will happen is that swath will change, and that's how you know. That tells WinMIP the texture, the area of the texture that's being considered for transparency, for this case, is that color. So when you go ahead and make your TGA from this point, and bear in mind, I'm trying to demonstrate, let's assume this, whatever was the texture that you created in your paint program, you brought your bitmap in, you selected your color. From there, you can then select TGA with that selected, and let's just pretend whatever this is magenta, and then save that file, and then you'll have that TGA will have that, and you'll be able to tell, much like I already explained, as far as when you go to apply it to your model, if you don't have that image alpha available, then it didn't do it right. So you can either try to reload or try to create the texture again. Sometimes WinMIP 2 can be a little finicky as far as making the appropriate the appropriate alpha channel, I guess. But for the most part, that's your main bet. So I know I'm tending to go off on tangents a little bit, but there's a lot going on, I guess, with this particular process here. So it's just only in good fair mention, I guess, as far as all these things. Okay, so I've already explained how you should apply it, and granted, keeping in mind this is all from original model. I'm using original textures. I haven't changed a thing as far as what the original model had to it. I wanted to keep it simple. The only thing that has been added differently to this model is our own shadow plane. We've removed the necessity for the light maps that were previously applied in the original model to apply our own shadow plane, I guess, based on ambient occlusion. And like I said, I may or may not go into that as far as how to go about doing that. Main focus for this stream was just to show how to deconstruct or even reverse engineer, I guess, an original model so you can edit it. So, and with all that said, let's go into this G-Seats piece here. And keeping in mind that there was, I'm almost tempted, I might go through just a little bit because I don't have enough to show exactly what I actually had to do to get to this point. So I feel it pretty good to try and demonstrate, I guess, how I actually got to this, because there's a lot that happened with this. Okay, so I'm realizing now. Okay, I was trying to remember, because I know in my 3DS that I saved for the sides, yeah, this is already adjusted, so I didn't adjust my... Because what I ended up doing is I saved a max scene. This is what I did. And this is something good practices to get into. Save yourself a scene. Once you get that all segregated out and reverse engineered, save it as a max scene. So that way you can always go back to see what you did. See what I did not do going into my older version of Max, and upon creating the pass exports and what have you, I didn't edit my original. I didn't apply, because I know in the sides what I did was I extended this piece here, because with these wings gone you can clearly see, and this looks terrible as far as this not going all the way to the ground. So what I did, I had created a new poly to fill this area in so that it has supports going on your way to the ground. And I think what I will do is I will bring that 3DS in. Yeah, because I did that all in the other version of Max. So I'm going to bring that one in. This is something that's kind of really nice too, with the different versions, even the two older versions, the older version and the newer version of Max. It's not very discriminatory on 3DS files, only Max scenes. You can't necessarily, it's not backwards compatible as far as to open a Max 14 scene in Max 7, say for example. But you can open necessarily Max 7 and Max 14. This is an example. It'll tell you whatever that it needs to be resaved because it's outdated. But so what I want to do is bring in my 3DS that is saved, and I might even update my scene. Yeah, so we want to merge that in. Yep, so that's already in there, so I'm going to do this. Okay, so this is my new... I'm going to go ahead and update this scene once I do this. This is probably a good thing I had done the stream, actually. So you can kind of get an idea of the poly that I added there based on that. So what I'm going to do is update my scene with that new... Now that I think of it, because now I got the two pieces here. I'm going to hide. I can probably just go ahead and delete that, actually. That should be in the same position. So I'll delete that. This is my new polys for my sides. And I'm going to go ahead and apply. So I should be able to here. Let's go back up here. Where's my sides? There's my sides. Just want to make sure I got it. So I got those polys selected. I'm just making sure I got that. And apply that to it. Ooh, I didn't do it right. What did happen there? Whoops. Something didn't work. Bear with me here. Huh, that's interesting. Why did that not work? G-sites. That should have applied. Uh-oh, I might have screwed something up here. So that should be my new piece there. I don't want to get sidetracked here. Why is it applying that? What are you doing? Okay, let me see. It's not applying the right texture. Just bear with me a second here. Trying to figure out what it's doing here. I think what it's doing... Give me a second here. We got G-seeds. Let's hide that a second. Yeah, why is that applying? I shouldn't be doing that. I've got it G sides TGA. Let me double check that again. View image. Yeah, why is that showing the wrong texture? What? Here, let me render that real quick and see what it's showing. That's odd. No, I would have never expected that to happen. For some reason, it's not applying the appropriate texture, even though it is applied properly in the material editor. G sides TGA to that always. Unbelievable. Anyway, I'll fix that, I guess, offline there. I guess I'll have to look and see what's going on with that, but that should have applied, that should really have applied that G sides texture to that. For whatever reason, it's putting the G seats. I'm not 100% sure why. Strange. Wow, that is really gonna bug me now. Yeah, see, and this is something I did not do. This is something I did, like I said previously. Yeah, to where I had edited the, yeah, and I saved it as a 3DS, and then I put it into the, in my case, Max 5, which is an older version, but it still works as far as the pass export, and I did not resave the scene, but I did not witness this. This is kind of strange. So for now, I guess what I'll do is I'm going to just kind of go backwards here. I'm not going to do that for now. I'm going to have to investigate that as far as why it's doing that. And I figured if I could get, let me try to get back here. Whoops. What are you doing? Alright, I really screwed up now. What do I got going on here? That's not what I want. So let's go back to this. I'm going to bring all that back in. For some reason it brought back in the original object. Alright, so we want to delete that. And that piece. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now we're back. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to look into that as far as why that shouldn't be doing that. It's kind of weird. So it's kind of being stubborn there. In any case, that's the edited piece there. And what I have done is I've already created 3DS files, independent 3DS files for each of these parts. So I got the G seats along with its pass, G seats logo, which is the other piece, and where's that pass? There's that pass. Kind of out of order here a little bit. That's okay. And also the G sides, its 3DS and its pass, and the G skybox with that little sliver and its pass. So I got the pass and its texture, so applied, and then once, like I said, once you have your script created and all that jazz, you put it into your Make 3DO, and I can go through that process, I guess, just a little bit. I know I've gone over it, I guess, in other streams, but just to kind of give some more refresher course, I guess, in that anyway. So I'm going to go ahead, let's go into here, go to my installation for Make 3DO. Now what you'd want to do is take all these files, put them into Make 3DO, and oops, give me a second. Okay, so I need the base texture. You do not need, okay, that's probably good to mention it, I guess. You don't need all your switching textures, okay? Just your primary textures prior to switching, if that's understood. So it's like any textures that you have that do switch and what they switch to, you don't need the, like in this case, the full for the seats. You only need the first initial, and this works the same way for any animated object too. like a video screen, for example. You only need that first frame, for example, as far as where it starts from, and then what it, not necessarily what it switches to. So, yeah, you would need, in this case, that texture for GSeats, the pass file. Seats logo in that texture. Don't forget the script. We also need the G sides. Whoops, not the 3DS, the pass and its texture. Skybox pass and its texture. So that's all the files we need. I'm going to copy those over to our Make 3DO. So that's all the files we need there. And what I'll do is I'll bring up a command prompt. This might all be relatively familiar, but I'm just going to go through the process. I'm going to go through the motions, I guess, as far as... So I'm going to point to the directory to which I have the Make 3DO. And you may necessarily have it in much closer... This is just the way I like to do it, because it's as far as the location where I have mine at. So this may necessarily be different than what you have. So just... don't follow, I guess, as far as what I'm doing necessarily. You put your items, I guess, where you see it's necessary. Yes, Torch. So in this case, yeah, it'll consist of, but with your script, you'll keep in mind with your script. This is how you construct your script. You're combining all those different parts. So like, all these different parts that are defined, so the G sides, the skybox, to include the seats, and so on, those are all being combined. And one of the combines that I have here, in this case, like say for example, I have the parts 1, parts 2, that's combined. So by the time you get to your final output, everything is going to be considered one object. So even though you have them all essentially separated, by pass file, and actually let me count here. So you have 1, 2, 3 separate pieces, essentially, in this case. So 3 separate pieces. But like I said, you are combining all those parts, because the seats, the seats and the seats logo, which are the 2 pieces, and then you have your sides. Oh wait, did I miss the sides? No, I got the sides in there too. So there's 1, 2. Yeah, there is 4 pieces. You're right. Stand corrected. Yes, there's 4 different pieces, 4 different parts of this particular deal. Yeah, be it the skybox, the sides, the seats logo, and then the seats. So yeah, there are 4 different pass files for 4 different parts, but you're combining those based on your script. Like I said, as you put this together, so I got the parts for the sides, the skybox, the seats, and the seats logo is down here. This is in this separate section, I guess, for that. That's got its own texture, so that's got its own pass. And then, like I said, the flow of your script or whatever is going to dictate that all these get combined. So, as far as the final 3DO, when that produces, when you run it through your Make 3DO, it's going to basically just condense it all into one object. And that's what I'm demonstrating right here now. So once we're going to cue this script in the Make 3DO to say, yeah, construct this 3DO based on that flow. All right, so let me continue pointing to Alright, so I'm pointing to my Make 3DO directory, and then I'm just going to type in Make 3DO, which is the executable itself. And in this case, we are using a script, so we want to do a -s for script, and then the name of the script. In this case, is g_seats.psg, and we don't have any other parameters as far as an environment map or anything like that, so we just push enter. And upon hitting enter key, it'll spit out whatever name that you've applied in the script, and it's all combined right here. So in this case, this model can be copied, and I'll go through that motion too, because I got the track to which these stands exist. Very good practice, whatever, to not directly overwrite the original model, just in case something goes wrong. So you want to make sure I've already got it copied, it's on the clipboard. I'm going to rename, and you can do this however you choose. This is the way I choose to do it. I'm just going to rename that so that it doesn't step on the original model. Paste the new one in there, and all the textures are already in there. It's using original. It's got the G sides, G box, all that jazz. So we're just replacing the original model. And if you have 3D SimEd, this is one way I guess you can use the 3D SimEd utility. You can go in here and don't pay attention to how this appears in here. Can't stress that enough. Do not go by how this looks in here as to how it's going to look in the game, or even in Sandbox for that matter, because that's going to be, this is just to give you an idea of how, you know, like say for example, you can see how I've added that poly in there to fill that gap in there, as far as not being, you know, in there. So you can at least get a sense of, yes, okay, this is there. So that's what I should expect to see when I put it in Sandbox and even in the game itself. So if anything, that's about the only thing you really want to use 3D SimEd for. You don't want to edit it, do anything to it. It's more or less just a viewer for this intents and purpose. So I'm just gonna escape out of that, and I'm gonna bring up the Sandbox utility here. I've already got. Oops, I must have already clicked on it, so I'll have to refresh that. Give me a second. Oh, that's interesting. Wow, that was weird. Okay. Making sure. Yes. If I didn't explain that well enough there, Torch, yes, it will be one 3DO up to this place. Like I said earlier, though, it's what we ended up doing. Talking about myself, what I ended up doing, I guess, with this model, with removing the light maps that exist in the original model, I do have a separate model, a separate 3DO, I should say, that takes care of that. So it's a shadow, and like I said, I may or may not go into that, how I produce that. I might just go over just briefly, you know, kind of summarize as far as what process I use to produce that. That involves an ambient occlusion, and that primarily the best way to do that is the newer versions of Max. In this case, 14. If you've got even newer version, even better. But it doesn't. You don't necessarily have that option with the older versions as much. I think some versions of Max 7, 2007, Max 8 have it. You know, as far as the pass exporter is concerned. I don't have those, so I always tend to use my Max 14, I guess, for that. So yeah, going into the track now, we put our new model in there. We should be able to see. So we're going to load this up. Okay, give it a second to load. Okay, there we go. And we're going to our camera view. It's got the track nice and loaded, and here's our new model. Now, keeping in mind it does not have the shadow on it, and when I say by the shadow, primarily what's under this skybox here. So it's going to look rather plain to this extent, but and I can show, you can get an idea here of where their wings were that had been edited, because the original stairs are still here, as well as the lighting. And this is from an SBP edit. That's fair mention. This is not the default Chicago. So yeah, it still has the stairs and the lighting from there, so you can see where the wing has been, and then also the extension of the supports here that didn't exist. So anything below basically this orange, this has all been added. so that it doesn't look like it's just floating in midair. Pappy did a really sneaky thing with that wing there that was previously there. You could not tell this was cut off because that wing or whatever kind of lined up with that. So as far as driving 190 mile an hour around the track, you ain't gonna notice it. So it looks a lot better, I guess, with that extension on there. And same can be said, I guess, for the other end as well. So, but yes, this is your complete model. This is the one model, and then here's the other end. You can get an idea here too, as far as where the wing would have existed in front of these lights, in front of these stairs. And what's nice about this, what I've come to find, is these stairs, these can be removed in those areas because they're in, I believe they were in groups of 3, and those are all original pieces, so these can be removed, quite easily, as well as the lights. And that's about all you'd have to do. There's nothing really else major you'd have to do other than the fact that it looks very bare there now without having the wings there. And just to give you an idea, you can see where the end of the lights are for that section. That's how far that came out originally. So, and then as far as the shadow plane, I'm going to go ahead and apply that just for the sake of this video. I'll show exactly what I'm talking about as far as it just adds, that final touch, I guess, to it, because you could leave it that way if you so chose. Just leave the stands this way. Oh, I know the other thing I wanted to show, what you can do if you didn't know how to do this. This is just another tidbit of information. If you wanted to check all the states, state switches and what have you, I guess for that. So right now it's in weekend race mode, so you got the full stands. So if you wanted to check the different, you can go into, I went too fast for that, go into adjust, set state variable, and it'll automatically, that by default being weekend, it'll be set to 0. Just push OK, and it'll show you, this is the testing practice happy hour state, so you can actually check to see that everything is loading the way it should. So you got the empty stands there, looks good. So then we can go back to weekend, put it on, check them all. You can do weekend. The 1 value is your happy hour in practice. 0 is testing, and that's all defined in the script, obviously. So you have 1, this is to be during your happy hour in practice. This is what it'll show. And in a lot of cases, you may necessarily want to apply a half-empty state, I guess, in that session. This particular model doesn't have that, so this is all just original. We didn't add that, but you could, if you so chose, I guess, to apply a half-empty texture. You could use, say for example, a texture that already pre-exists, be at the seats here, and create a half-empty. So like take, this texture, overlay it with this, and then just chunk out, the people in there. Simple way to do that, but I mean, you can create that separate texture and have that be a texture defined in your script. As far as you'd have to create, another component, pass file, I guess, to have that for sure. And like I said, define in your script and so on. But yeah, that could be done as well. We didn't do that for the sake of this piece here. But let's go back into sandbox. Okay, so that's happy hour in practice. So we can put it back to race, and that'll be full stands. So those states all work. Now the other thing you can check is your population switches via depress the O key while in game to turn objects off. You can change the state variable to population, and there is a convention in here. It has to be capital, and it's the same thing as what is defined in your script here too. So like here, as far as the state switch variable population, state switch variable weekend, these are the same values that you would apply in this state variable here. Whoops, Sorry, I got that open. So yeah, this is on 2, so that's everything on. That's all objects. I can change this value to 0. This will be where things will disappear, which it does. So we know that works. Okay, so we'll put it back to 1. Check that one. This is for the 1 value for the population switch is some objects. So it's in between the all and the none. So that's for some objects. So under the some objects, stands will still show. And that's another thing that you can change. If, say, you only wanted a portion, like say the skybox is missing, you could do that. You could have it defined in your script or whatever to say, yeah, I don't want that piece to show during that population switch, say, for example. That's another option. Haven't done that, in this case, but that could easily be done. But all those states seem to work, so we're good there. Now what I'll do, just for the sake of this deal here, I'll go a little bit into how to create I didn't want to get too far. I don't know. You tell me. What would you rather see? Would you rather me see the process of how? I'll leave it up to those in chat to show how I got from the original model to this, or to show how to make the shadow plane. I'll leave it up to you. You be the judge. You vote. It's not everybody answer at once. Do I still have anybody there? Making sure. Is this thing on? I want to make sure. I don't want to lose anybody. Yeah, so we've already done our make 3DO. I need to close this is what I need to do. Oh, I guess I missed some of what you did. I had sorry about that, Torch. You said the stands I need to edit are not done in sections like those. How would I cut half the bottom? Okay, so, alright, with that being said, it's a good question. So what you would be concerned with is how you would need to cut certain sections out. So if you don't have all those individual textures like I've just showcased here, and you need to edit out, I guess I could go into that a little bit here, and I can just, for the sake of this video, I can kind of show you how to do that. So say for example, I'll go into the seats here. Say for example, we needed to cut out, I don't know, just pick, I think this is already in here's an editable poly, yeah. So let's say for example, we needed to cut out a portion of these stands. So let's go into polygons. So for this one here, it's one complete polygon here, right? So if we needed to cut this down, like say to here, like draw a line, the way you go about that is to, and what'll probably work better here is if you go, and this is max 14, but you should be able to do it in your version. Go to your complete top-down view. You'll have your stands like this. Select the polys. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but let's say for example, let me click out of that for a second. Yeah, deselect that. Yeah, I don't want that selected. Okay. Yeah, deselect that. One of your best options would be, and this is similar to what I did, I guess, to cut off the ends of this particular model, as far as the wings were concerned. So it was primarily the front edge for this one that I had to cut the poly, because it extended off even after removing the polys for the seats, the seating. This poly here ended up extending over. I think it did it on both ends, so I had to cut that off so that it lined up, I guess, with this edge. So you can apply much the same concept. Okay, so chop the bottom of left. What do you mean? How do you mean? The bottom of. I was thinking the top edge. Or are you talking about down here? Down on the bottom? Oh, the bottom of the left. Okay. Okay, so yeah, we can do that. I could probably show that. So, like, say, so what you're saying is you need to cut half of this down on the bottom. Okay. Fair enough. So let's, again, go to your complete top-down view. And this is just in regular perspective view. And I'm going to get this lined up easily enough here because you got the curve. So what you'd want to do, and this is, keep in mind whenever you want to be an editable poly. So if you don't have it as an editable poly, you want to right click on it, make sure convert to editable poly, and make sure it says that in your modifier list. Okay. With that done, you would then want to go into polygon, select that, don't select any polys, but then there's a cut feature. You want to click on that and it'll turn, it should turn green. Okay, and then let's just say you want to cut this. What it'll do is it brings up a crosshair, and this can get a bit tedious. You want to be really careful. So if you bleed over, I guess, onto this part that you don't want cut, you could essentially end up drawing a line. So you want to make sure. So if you're not familiar with snap toggles, that's probably a good thing to get to involve. And I'll go through that. If you don't have these in here, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember how I got this all in here, but you probably don't have these. If you don't, I guess I can probably walk you through that, I guess, offline. But you want to have these snap toggles enabled for you, and what this okay, you do, good. So what you want to do is have it on, as far as doing a cut, just put it on the edge segment toggle, make sure that's highlighted, and then go to your snaps toggle up here and make sure it's on a 3, because I know there's a couple of different options there. Make sure it's on 3. So if you don't have it on 3, make sure it's 3. So make sure that's on. What that does when you go into your cut, probably disable that if you have to adjust that. Just make sure you select the cut again, and it'll turn green, and it'll give you your crosshair. And you want to zoom in enough. But what that should essentially do when you're in cut, see, that'll snap to that line. It'll turn green, just to make sure that you're on that line. That makes sense. Alright, so I don't want to zoom out too far. I want to get to that end. Okay, so I want to at least go to that one. So I want to go from this point to that point and cut just a section of this off. So again, make sure the cut is selected, snaps on. Kind of select this here, and then just draw a line. Just left click. You only need to do it once, and then just drag it to where you want it to stop, and it should snap to where you want it to stop, and then click the left again, and then right click to get off of it. What that'll do is it'll cut that poly. So now you've got 2 separate polys. So let me turn this. It's best to turn your snaps off too once you get it cut. And now what you'll be able to do is you have the 2 separate polys. So if you want to remove those polys, just select it and delete it. So now you've got that removed. And then what you can do from there, is, okay, this poly here is like this. You can do one of 2 things. You can take this here. That might be a little bit tough to do. probably what would be your best bet is do it this way. Remove this poly. You know, if you've got the polys from the original front, just remove that, and then from this point, go to edge, okay, and then select that edge here. And if you didn't know how to do that, once you got that edge selected, grab your up and down arrow here, and then hold the shift key and pull that down. Now you can exaggerate it, I guess, right for now. I guess that's and what I'll do, I'll create a new poly. Okay, and you'll be able to map that differently. Right now it's just dragging what was, you know, the texture that's on that edge for this particular polygon, which is fine. You'll be able to remap it to this afterwards. What you can do from there, let me see how I did this here. Yeah, I think that should work. So what I'll do now is go back down to complete top down. What in the world are you doing? Top down. Sometimes the buttons can be a little funky there. Alright, so what I'm going to do here, just to make it easier as far as to know how far I need to bring that poly down, is I'm going to create a plane. This is just going to be for temporary. Standard primitives, go to plane, just create a plane. And I might have to bring it up because this object is elevated from its original transform. So what I'll have to do is bring this plane up until it starts to, and what I'm going to go by is these pieces that here, I want to keep these, but I want to be able to adjust this one. So you can do it one of two ways. You can either bring it up to this point, be it the fact that you've cut so much back, this piece here is obviously going to be taller now because it's set further back. So what you could probably do in this case, for this example, is just bring this plane up. Yeah, well, initially what I'm going to do is like this. Bring it up to where it starts to... You might have to play around with this. It's probably not the best way to do it, but this is the way I did it for the supports on the side. Okay, so this will give you somewhat of an idea of where it was originally. So what you can do then, be it that your plane is now level, I guess, with this point, you should be able to adjust this one so that it meets up with that plane. So what I'll do is select that. We'll go into our vertexes, and it's going to be below the plane, so you're going to have to probably tip this a little bit to get at it. Yep, see, I've exaggerated it, which is fine. So you want to select those two edges, those two vertices there, and let's see if I go like this. Yeah, with those two selected like that. Oh, for crying out loud, what did I do? Freaking buttons aren't working like I want it to. This mouse needs to be cleaned, I believe. So yeah, anyway, you want to select those two vertices that you've over exaggerated. Okay. Zoom in here just a touch. Now, with those selected, you can go into your transform here and just pull it up. So you'll be able to see it here. And what's nice about this, you got that selected. You'll be able to see that dip below the plane. You'll be able to see the white edge. So you can just do it like that. So that'll give you a much better idea as far as like to make sure that it's at ground level, if you will. Granted, I might not have adjusted this plane properly. Let me check that again. Yeah, just let me check it. I don't know if that'll. Yeah, I guess it will. I don't need to transfer, so I'm going to just adjust this plane a little bit. I'm looking at these here as far as when it starts to dip into the plane. You'll be able to see it start to sink into it. The other thing you could do Yeah, be it the fact that this object is set to 0, it's a little bit tougher, I guess, to apply a transform to it. So you got to kind of do it the way I'm doing it, I guess. Yeah, and I'll show that here in a second as far as applying a different texture to it. So yeah, once you got this adjusted, you want to make all your adjustments first. Get it to where it needs to be, right? Yeah, so let me go back in. I'm gonna go ahead and adjust this. Get it all adjusted the way it needs to be. You know, as far as you probably already got it there, but I'm just bear with me here. Oh shoot, I don't want that selected. Only want these two there, so make sure. Yeah, there we go. So I just got those two selected, and I'm just going to adjust this to that. So let's just assume that this is adjusted to where I want it. Now, as far as the mapping goes, let's just say this is complete. You've got it where you want it. I mean, I could probably do the same thing on this one here, but for the sake of this, I'll just keep it short. So what you want to do is, you've got that texture already applied. Go into your modifier list and apply your unwrap UVW. Okay. From there, you want to open up your UV editor, and it may or may not be selected. You can always choose that texture. So in this case, it's the, what in the world is on there? Why is it doing that? Oh, there it goes. I think. Yeah. So just apply your texture like so. Why is that black in here? That's weird. That's odd. I don't know why I did that. Huh. All kinds of funky stuff happening today. Not 100% sure why it's doing that. Anyway, yeah, so you got your texture in your UV editor here. And I'm going to set this to filter selected faces. Okay. And then go into your unwrap modifier, choose your polygon. Select that polygon. That's your new poly that you added. Okay, go into your UV editor, and it'll probably show in like this. Right? So what you'll have to do from there is probably the best case for that type of plane, for that type of poly, I guess you could say. Just do a quick planar map that's over here. Just click that, and then it'll put it in this fashion. Okay? And that'll show up as such in your UV editor. So what you can do is then move that into place. Now, keeping in mind, a little bit of information here. This is a repeating texture, meaning that the texture is a 0, so it repeats horizontally. So what you'd probably want to do, and this doesn't edit, I guess, as far as the original MIP or anything like that. That you know, for the model that you're editing, that MIP will still have that same parameter, I guess, to it. What you want to consider when you're applying this poly, I guess, to that's repeated. So in order to get that to show, I guess, the same way that the game would load it, you'd want to go into go to options, go to preferences, and then I always set this up to the size the texture actually is, which I think in this case is a 256 by 1024. So I'm going to set this appropriately. Okay, and then tile brightness, and then what you want to do is tile the bitmap for this demonstration. And what that does is that actually tiles. You can tile it however many times you want. I'll go into that and I'll tile it. Yeah, we'll just tile it out. I got 3 times. It doesn't matter what you got that set to. It's just, you know, gives you some room, because as far as Enter 2003 is concerned, when it repeats, it just repeats infinitively. If that makes sense. It's how you define this particular poly is what's going to say where it's supposed to stop as far as the repetition of the texture. I'm going to increase the just realizing here I want to adjust the brightness of this thing here. There we go. Let's brighten that up a little bit. Now, this is your new poly that's on your texture. Moved it down to this point. It's probably fair to mention, probably what you can go by too is yeah, turn this off here for a second. What you want to go by is where your original model was laid out. So you want to follow that same, so that you don't have parts and pieces all scattered all over the place. You know, just to kind of keep some organization in your mapping. Kind of follow the same guidelines. So I'm going to turn this back on so you can see where this started and where it ended, as far as where it stops the repetition, or you know, it doesn't go beyond that point. So I'm going to actually, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the tile. I'm going to go up a couple more here so that it's following the mapping of the original model. So now I know exactly how far to go. So these are the polys that I'm trying to adjust and get that part of the texture, I guess, applied to it. So now what I'll do, with that selected, I'll go like this, drag this across to the end of that, and I can zoom back in here. Let me know if this is making any sense, because I want to make sure. So you've got your original model, this is where it ended. So this is your new poly, so I'm just bringing it to that same, I can use that as a guide as to where it needs to actually go to. And there we go. See, now what should happen, I don't know why it's not showing it, I don't know why it's doing that here, but let me see if I can reload. Whoops, go to the material editor. It might be because I got the unwrap on there, I'm not sure. Let me go back into here. What in the world? No. Why has it got... I don't want to be on sides, I'm on seats. Goofy darn thing anyway. Okay, so seats. Why is it on sides? Oh, I need to go back up here, that's why. So go into seats. For some reason that changed, I don't know why. Alright, point back to that. For some reason I got that selected off there, and that might happen. I screwed up somewhere, but that's okay. It's all good. Alright, drive on. So I'm going to go G seats. There we go. So now, there we go. That's better. See, now you get an idea. This is what you just mapped. This is what has just been mapped. And I can show even better. Go back into the UV editor. Let's go like this, and I'll show exactly how that changes. Okay, I'm not sure if I missed something here. So, what did you mention that it is? Just want to make sure I think I missed that. Did you mean that it's being explained properly? Okay, so what I'm going to do once again is I'm going to select this poly. What is? Oh, it's sand. Oh, I got you. So they put sand there, is what you're saying? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, hopefully this will still help you, I guess, to determine. So, like, if you edit the texture, say for example, for that area, yeah, I don't know how you would do. So, is it only in that section of that? So, as far as editing the texture that already exists for the model, does it allow you, I guess, to edit the texture that's there without touching on the rest of the grandstand and putting sand, I guess, in front of all of it, because that would be a whole different thing then. I mean, if there's room on the texture, the original texture, I guess, to apply a sand texture, then great. Because then you can just move your poly as far as the mapping for it. I'm gonna go ahead and select this again, going back into the editor. But you should be able to select. So, like, say for example, if there's room on the texture that you can apply sand, to it, and then you can just line that up to it. But just to show. Right, I get that, but I'm saying, does the texture allow you, I guess, to put a sand texture in it, or you have to create a separate texture? Is what I'm asking. Without looking at what you're working on, I have got no way of knowing. See, like in this particular case here with this one, it doesn't leave me any room to add sand, like say to this front supports here, without it affecting the rest of the model, as far as putting a sand texture, I guess, in the rest of all this. So what I'm saying is the texture that you're working with, or does it allow room, or is it forcing you, I guess, to have to apply a new texture to that area? Because you can do that. You could do that. You just have to create this area here that you're for the front, as sand. You could make that a separate object and then just script it accordingly. Right. That's what I was getting at. So what you would probably have to do in your case, if you only need sand in that particular portion, right, so yeah, make a new texture, and then what you could do is keep this part of what you cut out there, as far as this poly, you could segregate that out as a separate object so that you can apply that texture and do the same thing that I've already shown here, as far as have a section with that texture, have that be its own pass, and then just group and combine that in your script, if that makes sense. So that way it doesn't step on it, and you have the ability to maintain, I guess, the rest of it's it's not going to repeat that. It's going to be its own entity. So if I were to demonstrate, for example, instead of using this existing texture, if I was to use a new texture, okay, so yeah, if you need some further explanation on it, I can go through that. So what that would involve, and I'll just crudely, I guess, go through this. I'm going to get myself a sand texture. I don't even need to do that because I'm not going to, necessarily. So let me go into Paint Shop Pro here. I'm just going to create a generic texture. So say, for example, you create your texture, and I'll just do it this way. So say you got your texture and you've got whatever you're going to use for your sand. I'll just pick something here. Whoop. So let's say this is my sand texture. I'm going to save this as an image. Okay, let's just put this on the desktop here. This is just for this purpose of demonstration here. So I'm going to make this as a bitmap, and I'm going to save this as, I'll just do it as a G-sand, just for my purposes. Okay, so that's my texture. So that should be on the desktop. I could have just put that. Could have made it easier on myself and put it in. A lot of windows open. Let me close this. Alright, so here's my texture. I'm going to copy this into. I won't end up keeping this, but this is just to keep it simple. So I'm going to put that texture in there. That's the texture I want to use to put the sand in front of that. So what I can do, go back into Max. Instead of using that for this particular poly, I'm going to segregate. I think what I'll do first, I'm going to collapse this and remove this unwrap for the time being. I want to keep that where it is for now. Going to my hammer, I'm going to go collapse and collapse selected. So that'll just, collapse it together and maintain that mapping that I have there so far. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, make sure it's an editable poly. Okay, and then I'm going to go into polygon, select that poly, and I'm going to detach it so that it's separate. So I'm going to make this just GSAN. This is the purpose of this demonstration. So that's its own, that's going to be its own object, its own pass file even. So I can map that separately now. That's now in my scene here as a separate object. I'm with you as far as that goes, and that's what I'm kind of showing you what to do. So this will somewhat demonstrate exactly what you're wanting to do. So with this, this poly here in the front of this part that's been cut, I've got this its own piece, its own entity. In this case, GSand. Now what I can do is I can apply a texture to it independently, and I'm just going to go into. I'm going to apply this separately. Yep, let's go into standard, go to diffuse, it's a bitmap. I'm going to point to that particular texture. Alright, there's my GSand texture, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it to it, and it's going to show up funky. Okay, so now it's initially applied to it. Now I can go into that and apply a UV unwrap, an unwrap UVW. Like so, and then open up the UV editor. Now, keeping in mind whatever we had already applied a texture to it, so it's already got, it's already been. Now, you might have the option now, be it the fact that it's going to be the sand texture. You don't need to repeat it, I guess is what I'm getting at. So what you could essentially do is you don't need to extend it out much the same as the original supports. So yeah, let's make sure we got that here. There we go. And let's just reassure that we have this set to width is 1024. I always like to set it up same size. Okay, so in this case we don't need to tile it if we're going to do it this way. So what I'll do is make sure I got poly selected like so, and I'm going to rescale this. I don't know how that's stretched out so much. Anyway, I'm going to readjust this so that it goes like so. Okay, and you can scale this up however you like. This is what makes it, the world is kind of your oyster, I guess, at this point, because be it that this is its own entity, I mean, you can scale this however you like. Be it that it's just sand, there's really no repetition. It's just a random. I mean, you can have it fill this entire texture or just a portion of it if you like, but you can essentially adjust your poly, since that's a separate entity now, and just adjust it as such. And then now that you've got that applied as sand. Now, something that I guess that I'm thinking about too, that might not necessarily be straight up and down as far as them applying sand there. So it might involve for you, okay, I've already got that done there. I'm going to collapse this. Okay, let's go back to here. I'm going to reapply this as a convertible poly. Okay, so what you could probably end up doing, I don't know how it actually looks, but I would have to assume that it kind of goes on an angle maybe. It's not going to be straight up and down. So going back to editing this, I'm going to select, this is its own entity now, so I can take this and manipulate this. Oops, let's go, hold on, let's back that up. Let's go to complete up and down. So So what I'll do is I'll just pull this out. So I would have to imagine it'd be like on an angle, something like that. You know, maybe even at least up to the edge of, you know, the stands that haven't been cut back, possibly. Angled into the top seats. Oh, so it is. Okay. So what it does is it goes like this. Something like that. But then you'd have to create another poly to fill that in if you do that. If it's going to the top seats, yeah, if it's doing it like that, yeah, you'd have to add another poly and angle that out maybe. And you could do that. That'd be easy enough. You've already got this textured, so what you could do is go to edge, if that's the case. Go to edge on this poly. Hit your left shift and extend that out, and then you can adjust that, something like that. And then even if you were to go so far as to line it up with, yeah, and just fill that in with sand. The bottom retaining, oh, okay, so gotcha. So what they did was, okay, so let's backstep a little bit. So what you're saying is they still have the supports here, and what they did was just filled it in with sand, and what they cut back. So what you could probably do then, if anything else, whatever front that they have on there, you could segregate that out too, put its own texture on it, even make that as a separate object if you still choose. That way you've got your sand as well as that retaining wall, if you will. Yeah. So yeah, you could do that. So like if I wanted to, I created this poly here. So if you don't want this all sand, like I've got it here, you could take, it's still editable poly. Yeah. So what I'll do here is I'll select this poly. I'll detach that and make it another, and I'll just name it as G retain or something. And your naming convention should match. You should necessarily, I'm matching it, I guess, to this particular stand itself. You might necessarily want to name them, I guess, that in conformity, I guess, with the whatever it is that you're working with, so that it, you know, makes sense. That's just good practice anyway. So I'm going to just rename this G retain for my purposes. And let's say, for example, I want to, just for this case, I'm going to use the original texture. So I'm going to select this, go into material editor, and I'm going to go into, yeah, G seats. And I'm going to apply that. Okay, the mapping will be messed up, which is normal. And I'm just showing the versatility of this process is all. So like, I got the mapping on here, so I'll go back into unwrap UVW. Okay, and open up UV editor and make sure I get G seats bitmap. Like so. And what it'll probably do is select the polygon. So when I go into the editor, it's probably going to be flat, which is fine. So I'm just going to do a quick planner. Puts it in that form. And yeah, I can do like I did earlier as far as to apply the tile. Let's tile this out. Change the brightness, change the width. Yeah, let's actually the height on this one. So, and granted, you might do it differently, but I'm just, for these purposes, I'm just showing, like I said, the versatility of what you could do here. What happened there? Something didn't take. What are you doing? Oh. Why is it not applying? Hello? Why is it not applying my changes? Strange. It's being funky today. Alright, anyway. Yeah, so I can adjust this particular poly. I don't know why it's being stupid like that, but okay. So yeah, I can adjust this texture and say I just want this as this part here, I guess, to be on the front of that. Okay, so that's a separate object, so I can have that as, say that's the retaining wall and it's got the sand. That's up to, you know, it's level with, I guess, the other seats. So then you've got your sand with your retaining wall. Granted, this is pretty crude, but you get the idea. Yeah, that's how you would do that. And then, depending on how you do it, you know, you could have that as a separate object, another separate object, another piece, and that would go all the way across from, you know, in this case, if it went all the way across here, you could have that be its own piece and have the sand be its own piece with its own texture, and then script it much the same way that I showed earlier. You know, create its own pass file with its own texture and so on, and group it, so on and so forth. Does that pretty much explain enough? Is that getting you where you need to be? I'm here for you at this point. I think I've shown pretty much all I feel I can show, I guess, to even. All right, good deal. And granted, I realize that, you know, what I'm trying to show here is pretty crude. I mean, I could, granted, this particular stand doesn't have that same going on with it as far as the sand, you know, cut out there, but it at least gives you somewhat of an idea of how to cut that out, and then apply your new polys, segregate that out as an object, apply your texture, map it, all that good stuff. The only other thing is, you know, it's just as far as how you construct your script, and I think that's that would necessarily go into a whole nother realm there. See, where am I at here as far as time goes? Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize I put, oh, for crying out loud. Let me see. I guess I didn't realize I changed my scene on that. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody there. I keep forgetting that I've got a lot of my scenes tied to my, yeah, didn't realize I did that. So I apologize, I guess, if I did cut out at all. Yeah, I screwed up there, so let me put this back on. Oh, that is on too, so I need, there we go. I did not realize, I guess I switched that out. I just noticed that just now. Yeah. Yeah, I get into the habit of using my numpad, I guess, as far as putting values in there, instead of using the upper keys, I guess, above the letters. And I've got a lot, I need to get into the habit of not using that numpad, because I got a lot of my scenes for OBS, I guess, applied into there. There, that's better. So now I got you could, as far as applied as a separate 3DO, I mean, you're going to have your separate texture, you know, applied to that, you know, that area of the model anyway. So by having that extra texture, there's really no need to have it as a separate 3DO. But I mean, if you wanted to, yeah, you could do that. It just makes it a little bit more difficult, in my mind, I guess, to, you know, I mean, you could set that to 0 and all that jazz, and then just put the same transform as the overall. I think you would create a little bit more work than you really need for yourself, to be honest, if you were to do it that way. I think you would probably be best, whatever, make it just like I was showing here. You already have your separate texture, so if you needed any further adjustment, unless you're speaking of being able to adjust that portion of it. You should have that. That's like I said, as I already shown before, you should be saving those independently anyway, so that you have that to refer to. So if you need a further adjustment down the road, you can still refer to it. That's just a good practice to get into. So either as a scene or as a separate 3DS, so that you can bring that, you can recall that and make appropriate adjustments where needed. You know. Exactly. I mean, you know, so don't just take it as once you get it done and you feel you've got everything the way you need it to be as far as the way it's presented here, and then just toss out, I guess, anything, save everything. If it boils down to it, it's like just so that you get yourself used to it. So like, you know, I really like to change that. You know, it's not quite right. It doesn't have the right amount of angle or what have you. You can always refer to that. You can do that one of two ways, if not both. You can save all the individual pieces, be it 3DSs and pass. But especially like if I was to go and save this as a scene file, so I can, you know, continue to come back to this and adjust it accordingly, I can do that because everything's going to be in there. So I can just either call up that scene file and adjust them accordingly, save a new 3DS, you know, to make it an overall new model, or that piece or what have you. You have that versatility. Don't try to cut yourself short on what you have available to you. If you're feeling it necessary or whatever to have to make adjustments down the road, save all that. I mean, I've got, just for this stand, the edit of this stand, as far as all the reverse engineer, this is everything that I've got, to include my ambient occlusion, I guess, for the shadow. But yeah, I've saved everything. I mean, as far as the individual 3DSs, I got the produced pass files, the textures that go with it. I mean, everything's there, to include the scene file that I originally saved. So it's, like I said, it's just a practice, a very good practice to get into, I guess, to maintain all that information, so you have it at your disposal, I guess, if it comes. I mean, with the way there are a lot of grandstands for particular tracks in NASCAR that are being edited, yeah, you may necessarily have to visit that again, because they may do something down the road where I think I might be on the same wavelength as, you know, you're thinking. Maybe they add some type of I forgot what I was thinking there. You know, like maybe they add some type of funny business there, you know, as far as like maybe they put some plants or something in there, or maybe they color it or something. You know, maybe they add some type of snaz to it, you know, to make it look pretty, you know, than just having sand. You know, you never know. You know, that's totally possible. You know, from what we've seen, the changes that they make to a lot of checks, that's totally not out of the question. So leaving all that information available to you down the road, if they do tend to make them type of changes, you would have that there to be able to adjust it. I mean, I can go back and recall, I guess, all the things that we've changed for any one particular object for a track. I mean, much the same way. I mean, it's just, we have all the different things that have been done to it from start to finish. And the fact that they're removing a lot of these items now, it's just like, makes no sense, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, as far as the backups with backups, I mean, it's not so out of the question, I guess, that's usually necessary. But I think what I'll do, if I answered most of your questions, I guess, as far as how to cut out sections of the grandstand, I guess, if that's been satisfied, there's some other things I still need to do, I guess, with this one here. I need to update my scene here. I need to figure out what happened with. I think I kind of figured that out there, but between that and I want to go through a little bit as far as how I created that shadow plane, because as I've mentioned earlier, the light maps that existed on the original model have been removed, so it's necessary, I guess, to bring in a shadow to apply the proper shading.